Blair Levin is the Executive Director of the Broadband Initiative for the Federal Communications Commission, and with the release of the National Broadband Plan, 350-plus pages, Mr. Levin, the opposition to the broadband plan has been rather muted. Are you surprised by that?
Actually, we've been very, very happy with the response to the plan. It's a comprehensive document, and I think what you saw was that a lot of people, even though they disagree with really elements of it, have, number one, a great appreciation for the work that went into it. Number two, a great appreciation for the professionalism. It's a serious document. It goes through the data. It's very data-driven. It's very analytic. It doesn't react to things that don't exist in the real world. It tries to lay out a path that's both visionary and practical, and I think there was a great appreciation for that. And third, I think that there was an understanding and appreciation that it is being very transparent about what the government agenda should be. Obviously, there are lots of details that are not appropriate for the planning process, but rather appropriate for the government as it starts to implement those things. So we were very, very pleased that a wide variety of folks, from all folks, all sectors, industry, the public interest groups, elected officials, state regulators, a lot of folks gave us a lot of praise, and we certainly appreciated it.
And one of the critiques that came down was from Nicholas Johnson, a former FCC commissioner.
Yes.
And he wrote in the Des Moines Register, as a result, the National Broadband Plan offers broadband consumers no hope of protection from price gouging by limited competition phone and cable companies earning upwards of 80% profit margins.
Yeah, I disagree with that critique. I think there are a lot of very pro-competitive things in the plan. I think Mr. Johnson, with due respect, completely ignores a number of, for example, of spectrum recommendations. That what we're seeing in various places in the world is that while wireless is not a complete, perfect competitor, it does, in fact, as it has done with voice, provide an alternative way that forces a market-based mechanism of putting some price constraints on certain fixed offerings. We also think that he ignores some other things that we're doing to be pro-competitive in the piece. And I would note, it's interesting, while we've received that criticism from some, yesterday at the House hearing, there wasn't a single member of the House who criticized us for not being aggressive enough, as Mr. Johnson would be, but there were a number of members of the House who said, hey, you guys went too far. So I find that criticism not really a valid criticism in my view.
Well, Republican Representative John Shimkus from Arizona, this is what he had to say at a hearing this week in Congress.
95% of our people have broadband. 5% do not. You know where they're at? They're in my district. You know what? The stimulus fund is not going to them. And the RUS fund is not going to them. And that's what torques people off. 95% of us have it. It's the private sector that's rolled it out. And now we want to take over 1/6 of the economy, another 1/6 of the economy, through moving this whole information age from Title I to Title II, the dirty little secret back here. It's already been exposed. We're not going to get a surprise from the chairman this time in the hearing because it's here. Some commenters have suggested a second approach in which the FCC would implement certain plan recommendations under its Title II authority. So let's have this hearing. Let's have this debate. The system is working. Where it's not working is in rural America, which we spend billions of dollars, and the money's not going there.
And, of course, John Shimkus is from Illinois, but your response to his substantive comments.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say that he appears to be critical of something that was not really part of the plan, which was how the stimulus dollars are being spent. And that's a worthwhile debate, and one can have that. Our focus on the plan was actually to address his concern. There are 7 million American homes that do not have access to broadband, and we have a very detailed, comprehensive reform package for universal service, which spends about $8 billion a year, but is not spending it in a way that is likely to connect those homes. We figured out a way in which we need to shift dollars around to do that without raising the assessment that consumers currently pay on their telephone bill for universal service.
What about his critique of switching it from Title I to Title II? Number one, what does that mean, and how do you feel about his view?
Yeah. Under the current law, which was adopted in 1996, there is a distinction between the regulation of traditional telephone companies under what is called Title II and kind of what are sometimes thought of advanced services, which are under Title I. This is a very complicated legal argument. There are very important issues, but frankly, the plan didn't get into that at all because we took the view, and we were very clear about this from the beginning, that the purpose for us in the plan was to develop a data-driven set of recommendations that we thought were important for the government to take action on. And by the way, the thing that he's absolutely wrong about is this notion of taking over 1/6 of the economy. We're not proposing that in any way. In fact, our view was to look at what are the levers of government that government traditionally does, such as control of spectrum, such as universal service, such as control of rights-of-ways, and ask the question, are we doing it in ways that help the broadband ecosystem? Or are we doing it in ways that are inefficient? And we found in pretty much every case that there were enormous inefficiencies that needed to be corrected. So I think his characterization is wrong. Now, as to that Title I and Title II, the plan itself doesn't go into it because we were focused on what are concrete, practical recommendations that will help make this country better in terms of its broadband performance, and that the appropriate place to address the jurisdiction question really is in the follow-up rulemaking and implementation.
We are joined also by Lynn Stanton, Telecommunications Reports.
Another criticism that came up yesterday during the hearing was that the plan could lead to FCC mandates for unbundling on broadband services in the same way that there were unbundling mandates on regular voice service in the 1990s.
Yeah.
And is that what, maybe you want to explain what unbundling is, but is that what you understand the plan to be suggesting?
Well, look, there are a number of different things which are currently under law that require incumbent phone companies to share their facilities in various ways. There has been, there's a lot of different proposals for doing additional kinds of unbundling or in some other way requiring incumbents to share facilities. There's a broad spectrum of those things. What we said in the plan is that what we want to do is primarily drive private investment. And so, for example, one of the things that has really driven private investment in the past is availability of spectrum. So we were focused on the spectrum issues that were very important. Another place is how do you drive investment to those areas in rural America that aren't getting it. And so we have various things for universal service reform. And then in the market where there is opportunities for competition, to what extent do you do that? Traditional bottleneck analysis. There are some things in the plan that really are where we talk about how this fits into the context of competition. But a lot of those proceedings are very fact-based and very specific and more appropriate for specific rulemakings. So we have a very pro-competitive agenda. But what we were saying is for some of these things, those are already subject to existing FCC proceedings. The FCC ought to determine those proceedings. For some other things, for example, with set-top boxes, we have a very pro-competitive section on set-top boxes because that is one place where we think we need to change the rules in order to drive private investment, drive innovation, drive American leadership in integrating traditional video with internet services.
If I could follow up on,
Sure.
Since you just mentioned set-top boxes, it seems as though the plan has sort of a vision of trying to get all three screens, as it were, to be platforms that people might use to get on the internet. It seems as though a lot of the low adopter populations, according to your own data gathering, are relying more on mobile screen. And why do you think that the television is? I mean, do you think that people they don't want to buy a physical computer and just using the set-top box and having that screen is going to be a real attraction for them if they're not interested in buying a computer?
There are a variety of different barriers to adoption, which 10 years ago were probably, they weren't as significant from a public policy perspective. But now as we move to a world where if you want to get if you want your kid to be able to do their homework as well as other kids, they better have access to the internet at home because that's the primary tool now kids use for doing homework. If you want to search for a job, the internet is the primary tool. If you want to train for a job, increasingly, Job training is being done over broadband. So it's very important to make sure it is available on all screens. But there's a difference between what you can do on your mobile device and what you can do on a larger screen. So we're cognizant of that. We want to drive it everywhere. And we took the approach, and in this way it was a little bit different than a lot of other national plans, that we want to drive the velocity of commerce across all of the different parts of the ecosystem, not just increasing network performance, but increasing enabling better devices. And one reason we focused on the set-top box was we looked at mobile devices and kind of general desktop devices. Didn't seem to be a problem. Seemed to be a lot of competition, a lot of innovation, a lot of very good things happening. Set-top